Hey guys, T-Bull here. Today I got to look at the French Tier 5 battleship, the Normandy. So you got the JoJo build on the screen here. I do want to point out I don't really design commander builds too specifically until I got the entire line unlocked and kind of played through. So that's just kind of the build I'm using to grind out the line with. Now this first game on Normandy is on Estuary. Ends up being a kind of a high damage game, so we'll talk about this game and we'll kind of go over the ship stats, and then I do have an additional game coming up here to look at as well. So the Normandy stats wise, low HP. This is actually a pre-upgraded version. It's got the mods on it, but this is the stock hull. It's got 44.7 HP. The upgraded one 48,300. Still pretty low for the tier. Even about 10,000 less than certain other ships at the tier, so that's quite a bit of a health pool disadvantage. And armor-wise, not the strongest. I mean, it's tough to say just looking at the numbers on the stat sheet, but it's not really meant to take a lot of shots. It does have nice speed, though, 27.4, which puts it at the fastest at the tier, at least tied with the Dunkirk, so good mobility on this ship. Now here we have a capture the base mode game. Normally I'd like to play the wing a little bit more, but you can see the team to the north of us that spawned on this side. They're not really holding down this side particularly strongly, so I'm angling in towards the ships that are going to be in the middle with the idea of potentially moving forward if the side remains clear. I still think it's kind of your responsibility to clear out your side first, so in most instances, I don't like to move too aggressively on these evenly spawned maps, just because, in my mind, you are kind of responsible to make sure your side is secure, and then you can go move around and try and help other teams, or portions of your team, I should say. But getting back to the ship, I mean, you can see there with that opening salvo, it's capable of doing quite a bit of damage. I'm finding these guns to be pretty accurate. Keep in mind, I do have a very high level Andrew Cunningham inspiring these battleships, so might be getting a little bit harder for me to judge the accuracy in some cases, but compared to a lot of tier 5 battleships, it seems pretty accurate here. 12 guns, and while the individual damage isn't great, in fact it's the lowest at the tier at 10,379 on my build. With that many shots flying through the air, you're capable of doing quite a bit of damage. I'm finding kind of the same thing with the penetration on this ship. You'll see a lot of these shots in these games I take. A good portion of them are going to be aimed at the top halves of the ship. Now you can still get citadels from those angles, especially at long range, where those shells are dropping a lot more vertically, as you'll see in some instances here. Speaking of range, it has very good range, 17.4 again on my build. The only one at the tier higher than that, 18.4 on the Fuso. So able to outrange the Americans, able to outrange the British, and, kind of hanging with the Mutsu and behind the Fuso. So you gotta keep that in mind when you're seeing these things out here. You may not be within range to shoot them, but they can certainly return fire to you in a lot of cases. And again, with these salvos here, we're going to see some pretty juicy damage. So kind of my feel for the French line so far, I'm about, maybe a quarter of the way through the Tier 6 Lyon. They seem like they're relatively lightly armored battleships and then kind of heavy hitters. You just kind of have to work with the penetration. I think running JoJo either as an inspiration or the actual commander is definitely going to help out these French battleships quite a bit, because on paper they do have quite a bit of a drop off on pen, especially at range. So I haven't had a chance to experiment with a lot of different builds yet, but I'm finding that the combo I've been working with that we saw earlier on the screen has been working out pretty well. But how I have this ship set up, I do have the rudder shift on slot 2. You can always kind of go back and forth. Do you want to do the prop mod to kind of get you moving back and forth, starting and stopping, which is obviously very slow for battleships? Or do you want the steering gears to help, move back and forth, kind of open up your firing angles. You know, when you get the chance to use your rear guns, you know, that steering gears will help you swing it out quick, take the shot, and then re-angle your ship. So, as a kind of a general rule of thumb, you really got to play each battleship to get a good feel for what you'd rather have. But for battleships that I tend to keep in motion more than starting and stopping, those I'll usually use the steering gear, and then for more stationary type battleships, then I'll often use the prop mod on those ones. So steering gears here, and if you look at the gun configuration throughout these two replays, you'll see the front two turrets you can get on target very easily, and I'm very steeply angled to the reverse obviously at the moment so we can't see it, but if you're facing forward at a target, the front gun obviously is always going to be able to hit them. The second one, you don't have to open up your rear, you know, in terms of how far you're opening up that firing angle to get that second turret on target. To get that rear turret, though, you do have to get fairly widely angled. So kind of the key, it's always a good rule of thumb for battleships, but when you are under threat, you just kind of want to fire the front two guns. And then when you are confident that you don't have anyone actively targeting, that's when you can take a little liberty and swing that rear gun out and take the full salvo. Either way, I mean, you have 8 shells flying through the air or 12. You can have very good salvos either way, but getting those extra 4 shells in the air, obviously quite a big bonus, so look for opportunities to do that. But it is kind of a risky play because when you swing wide enough to get that rear gun in play, the armor on the ship isn't strong enough to really withstand incoming return battleship fire at the angle that you're going to be presenting. So again, you just have to be kind of careful and pick your spots on when you're going to go ahead and do that. Now, getting back to this game, let's take a moment to maybe analyze the map and talk about map control. On Capture the Base, you get a lot more randomized positions in terms of what people are doing and where they're moving to. But kind of just look at our positions here. We can draw basically 2 battle lines. One basically running, you know, both of them are running northwest to southeast. But you can see where our team is. We're kind of lined up, so we're all more or less in front of our base. So that's kind of defended by our battle line. And we're kind of pushing forward, you know, trying to close in on their base and also envelop the enemy team. Whereas they're lined up behind the base, so they're not actually protecting the base by being in front of it, but, you know, obviously they can defend it by shooting into it from where they are. But people, in terms of reading the map, there's certain things you want to be doing. You want to be looking for targets of opportunity, particularly broadside targets and stuff like that. Or, you know, there's a million things you can do with the map, but something I don't know I think a lot of players don't really understand the concept of map control, or if they do, they haven't really incorporated it into how they're thinking about this game. So, I mean, what is the enemy team defending is what you got to kind of analyze here. And they're not really defending anything. Again, they have very limited resources that are blocking us from getting into their base. So the more we can push them back, then we are allowed to get ships into their base, start capturing it. And that puts additional pressure on them, and if they're trying to win, they are forced to push forward in that instance. Whereas if they had kind of maintained a little bit more map control like we do, we have the defensive line in front of ours. So they have to push us back quite a bit to actually get into the cap and then apply that scoring pressure on the game. So, you know, you need to... It's a skill, it's not very easily explained, but I kind of want to put the idea in your mind so you can think about it. When you're looking at your map and saying, how's our team doing? Look at what you're defending on the base, what you control, and then you're looking for firing angles, trying to create spread between you and your teammates so you can get crossfires and stuff like that. There's a lot of different objectives that you want to accomplish by your position on the map, but, you know, just analyzing your whole team's position at any given moment is something I would recommend working on and just spending some time thinking about. So at this point, they're down to 2 cruisers, a battleship, and a destroyer, where we're not really sure where that one is. But everything else is kind of identified. We're pushing into them and kind of sealing the deal. And again, looking at the battle lines, now we're starting to cross into their base where they're completely losing control here. Broadside Mayoko is kind of a priority target for us. You know, that's what you want to be looking for on the map. Shots away, and he gone. And you can see here, I mean, this ship is quite dangerous, and I kind of noticed it playing against them a little bit last week when we were working on some other ships to review, and then now that I've started playing these French battleships, they do pack quite a bit of a punch, and you know, I would recommend taking them seriously when you're out there and you see them running around. But you know, I mean, you can see there we're just punching shots through these guys. But you know, when you see them, just keep in mind they're not really heavily armored. They can angle somewhat successfully at very steep angles. But if they're giving you a, you know, 45 and you're taking those shots, you're going to be able to punch through a lot of shots on them and potentially hit the citadels at, you know, somewhat more steep angles than you might be able to on some other ships. At least that's the way it's seeming to me playing them. So go ahead and just try and get rid of them if you can. And they were taking out the Queen Elizabeth. And here we swing the back turret back. Now this is a move I'd recommend practicing. You know how we were talking earlier about just firing the front too, if that's your angle that you have. A lot of times that's going to leave your rear gun exposed. If you have that pointed at another target, you can fire those front turrets at the forward target, take them out, and then swing that back one back, fire the shot there, and then you can just swing your front ones back and resume firing at your main target. But they were able to kill them both using that move. So that's an effective move to be practicing on battleships. Now this one's done at this point. The destroyer runs away and hides, so we'll cut it here. Now I'll just say here, I mean, the Normandy is a really fun ship. It's definitely one I'll take out from time to time in the future here. And the one after that, the Lyon, I'm about, I don't know, 10-15 games into that, and that's been pretty fun as well. So I think the French battleship line is going to be quite attractive for a lot of players here. So this game we got on shards. Now, shards is always interesting. You got 3 destroyers, so in your mind, and it didn't look like they were divisioned up. So you're probably going to have 1 per cap. Now, I don't ever take battleships up these gaps. The thing you got to think about on shards is there's kind of this closed entrance on A south spawn and this closed entrance on C north spawn, meaning to push into this cap from where you spawn, you have 2 very narrow gaps. I mean, you have the very narrow gap in front of you, and then if you shift to my right here, or, you know, I think it's to the right on both of them, you kind of have an alternative diagonally facing gap to get into these. Now, savvy destroyer players will rush into position and just blind torp these 2 gaps. So pushing into these caps aggressively when you're on these, what I call the closed sides, is a little bit of a scary proposition. So you usually kind of forced to play a little bit conservatively here. That's why I like to play pretty aggressively on the A north side spawn and the C south side spawn. If you can capture those caps quickly, that's kind of the side you have the advantage on. So failure to capture those quickly can often put you at a deficit because the enemy team usually can secure theirs. So anyway, here we got a shot on the Fuso, and you can see that's a 30k salvo with 1 citadel. So again, this is not a ship you want to be taking lightly, and that's a fairly long-range shot. So, you know, I mean, it's one of those things where the damage output capabilities of the ship are very high, but again, its ability to withstand, you know, sustained efforts to sink it doesn't really stack up in that category. So I wouldn't put it on like the highest priority target or ship at the tier to target, but it should definitely be, if you have access to the Normandy and can shoot it, just go ahead and begin withering it down, because the longer it's around, the more damage that it can potentially do. And you never know when that 30k itself is going to come from out of nowhere, but you know, it's just not a ship you want to be leaving around for sustained periods of the match. Now, Shards is a map that has what I would call dead zones. On the far northeastern side of C is kind of a dead zone, and on the southwestern side of A is kind of a dead zone. You can see my team has ships in both of those. This map isn't the worst example. Like, other examples are north, the far eastern side of the map. There's basically really no reason to go there in a lot of cases because you remove yourself from the game for large stretches of the time. Fault Line's another one, that far eastern corridor, where if there's no objective there, what you want to avoid are these places on the map where you're separated completely from all the other action by big islands that you can't shoot over and you can't get around for 2, 3, 4 minutes. So voluntarily putting yourself in those positions is essentially the only influence you have on the game at that point, is that you're handing the enemy team an advantage in ships because you are not able to shoot anyone, you can't spot anyone, you can't torpedo anyone. There's nothing you can do there except for sail around trying to get to the other side. So for all intents and purposes, you're not in the game, and I consider that actively hurting your team by playing those positions. So just a little bit of a note on Shards here. Now, they've captured B. For some reason, they didn't end up capturing C. I thought they should have. And we're having a hard time capturing A. Now, you might be thinking, why am I not more aggressively pursuing A? You know, I'm a big proponent of playing the objective that you spawn by. This map, though, like we talked about earlier, a battleship playing that kind of closed off side of A or C, it's just a losing proposition, especially if they have a destroyer that's known to have it there. If for some reason I tried to push through those narrow gaps, it's a very easy kill shot for destroyers to hit. So, but the interesting part about this map is if you, and a lot of maps frankly for battleships, if you position yourself somewhat centrally, I can effectively pressure all 3 caps. If you look on the map here, all I have to do is really move about half a grid to my north, and I can cover every single objective in the map here. So, this B, number 1, I think, is the more important objective on this map because, each team should be able to have an advantage capturing either A or C depending on where they spawn. But B is kind of the swing cap, and B usually aggressively kind of flips back and forth quite a bit in this map. So being able to pressure B is more of a winning proposition in my mind. Now here's a close range shot on a destroyer, and that's a huge 6 overpens, but that's half their health, so that's equivalent of a multi-citadel shot against a battleship. And again, this ship is capable of dealing a lot of damage, and it's a lot of fun to play because of that. But again, it's a ship that you want to be respecting. So now we've kind of driven that destroyer out of here, and we've kind of moved into B, and this is cutting them off from earning points from it, and we're able to sink that destroyer, by the way, which is a nice bonus. But now if we can flip this, obviously that's going to put us in quite a bit of an advantage. You always should get in the habit of not being hyper aggressive when, okay, we got a 2-ship lead here, we got a decent lead on the scoreboard, this game's over, let's just push in aggressively and try and get all the kills. Sometimes it's going to happen a lot of times, when you start getting these routing situations, but you still want to play good, sound fundamentals, and capture those bases, because what usually happens is your team's all spread out, they're all trying to push into these ships, and they might be grouped up together tightly, so you're going to get one ship pushing into 2 or 3 ships, and they're going to sink that one. The next ship pushes into 2 or 3 ships as a solo, they sink that one, and that's how games turn around very quickly. So by sealing up those objectives, you're just going to put a lot more pressure on the team. They have to be aggressive, and you can kind of just play a little bit more defensively, and you're still probably going to sink all the enemy ships, but you just kind of want to put that insurance policy in your pocket. And here we had the York screaming around, trying to catch us unawares, but we were able to swing around and blast him pretty hard, and I think that was about 20k altogether there in the York. And obviously he's flipping around like a fish, which means he's trying to launch more torps. And luckily it goes for my friend here, not me, because that would have been a fairly hard salvo to dodge had it been well aimed. But we're still alive here, 80k, and on all in all, pretty solid game in terms of strategy. I wanted to kind of show shards because I wanted, we got to talk about all these different maps, and my goal still is to do videos about each map and kind of my general thoughts on how they play. But shards, I don't know how often we've gone through kind of the concept of the closed sides and how that being the equivalent of like a weak side that you find on like Haven or Fault Line, where again you kind of need to adjust the strategy because even though the spawns are even 3-3-3 across the board, it's still a little bit of a disadvantage depending on which side you spawn on. You got to react accordingly. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, you should consider subscribing. There's a lot of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions, comments, leave them below. Love to hear from you guys. And we'll see y'all later. All right, peace.